and welcome to another edition of Spark Shift Succeed, a series dedicated to helping teams navigate the realities of today's rapidly changing workplace. I am Mel Sodedze, your host, and on behalf of Unique Speaker Bureau International, thank you so much for joining us today. As we lean in, we invite you to think about the most successful businesses, teams, and leaders of our time. Their success was not built in periods of comfort. It was forged during moments of uncertainty, moments when they had to rethink assumptions and challenge existing models, adapt faster than their competitors, and turn obstacles into opportunities. Today's session invites us to explore exactly that. The topic is From Obstacles to Opportunities, Turning Disruption into Growth, and our speaker is none other than Dr. Ansgar Pabst. Dr. Ansgar Pabst is a transformation speaker and growth strategist who helps organizations turn disruption into opportunity. With experience across Europe, Africa, and emerging markets, he has worked with leading brands, including Walmart, Samsung, and Woolworths. Known for bridging global boardrooms with township economics, Dr. Ansgar brings both academic depth and real-world execution. As he often says, strategy is easy, reality is messy. Now, with that said, help me welcome the incredible Dr. Ansgar. Doc, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and I'm delighted to be here. Let me first check whether you can see the background, the presentation. Great. Yeah. Before we begin, let me explain what makes my perspective slightly different. I operate between worlds, so corporate and startup, formal, informal net markets, boardroom, townships, developed and emerging economies, top and base of pyramid. Over the last 20 years, as Melissa indicated, I've worked across various continents. So is in Europe with Lidl, Samsung in Asia, Walmart in America, Woolworths in Australia, and locally here with Pick n Pay and Macro. At the same time, I spend much of my time working with entrepreneurs, informal traders, and township communities. And what fascinates me is simple. The same obstacle can be interpreted completely differently depending on which world or through which lens you're looking from. One person's problem is another person's opportunity. One person's obstacle is another person's future growth engine. Very often, the greatest opportunities are hidden inside things that others dismiss as obstacles. Which brings me to today's topic, From Obstacles to Opportunities, a simple framework built around three ideas: meaning, interpretation, and action. Meaning shapes how we see the past, interpretation shapes how we experience the present, and action shapes the future we ultimately create. Or put differently, three buckets: past, present, future. Or to put it in the Unique Speakers Bureau's language, fuel, ignite, accelerate. Let me show you what I mean. Our fuel is where meaning shapes identity. There's a famous story of two twins. They grew up with the same alcoholic and abusive father. Years later, one became violent and destructive, exactly like his father. The other became successful and compassionate. When both were asked why they became who they became, they gave exactly the same answer. Because of my father. Same experience, same trauma, different meaning, and a different future. The Austrian psychologist Alfred Adler argued something profound. You are not determined by your experience, but by the meaning you attach to them. In fact, the meaning you attach to your experience becomes self-determined. And I experienced this personally. A few years ago, I went through a divorce. Honestly, it was one of the most difficult periods of my time. And the irony is that I eventually learned lessons about myself that, had I known them earlier, may have prevented the divorce in the first place. The event never changed. What changed was the meaning I attached to it. Was it failure or was it fuel? Because perhaps the question is not what has happened. The question is, what meaning are you attaching to it? Many people see the past as baggage. I don't. I see it differently. In fact, I see the past as the perfectly crafted and personalized curriculum for your own future. Success is fuel, failure is fuel, experience is fuel, mistakes are fuel. We all have gaps, skills, knowledge, experience, confidence. The question is not whether we have gaps. The question is whether we see them as opportunities for growth or excuses to stop. Because life is obviously not happening for you. This life is happening not to you, it's happening for you. And the same is true for organizations. Many organizations also have gaps. They see gaps, capability gaps, market gaps, distribution gaps, knowledge gaps, resource gaps. The question is, do they see those gaps as limitations or as opportunities for growth? In South Africa, I often see former retailers looking at township economies and see risk, complexity, informality, uncertainty, yet entrepreneurs operating inside the same community see opportunity, entrepreneurship, community, and future growth. The obstacle did not change. The meaning changed. And once the meaning changed, the opportunity became visible. Which raises an interesting question. Why do people and organizations interpret the same reality so differently? And that's where the transformation begins. Ignite, where interpretation shapes experience. This is where the brain enters the story. One study found that most of the things people worry about never actually happen. Another study found that many people preferred giving themselves an electric shock rather than sitting quietly alone with their thoughts, which suggests something fascinating. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with uncertainty, deeply uncomfortable with stillness, deeply uncomfortable with the unknown. And perhaps that explains modern life. Constant notifications, constant scrolling, constant distractions. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, called this the existential vacuum. A world where people have the means to live, but often lack meaning to live for. Many people today are overstimulated, but under-reflected. We fill every waking moment with noise, notifications, scrolling, distractions, not because we are fulfilled, but because silence would force to confront ourselves. Many people experience the physical sensation of possibility and interpret it as fear. What if some of the things we call anxiety are actually invitations to growth? I think that may be one of the most important leadership lessons of our time, because opportunity and fear often arrive wearing the same clothes. The brain fundamentally is a prediction engine, not a growth engine. Its primary job is not to make you successful. The primary job is to keep you safe and alive. For most of human history, uncertainty equaled dangerous. If you left the tribe, if you entered unfamiliar territory, if you took unnecessary risks, there might be a saber-toothed tiger waiting around the corner. The problem is, the saber-toothed tiger disappeared thousands of years ago. But the brain has not completely moved on. It still prefers certainty, familiarity, predictability, the known. And this is why I want to show you the next image. The motorway represents familiar thinking, familiar habits, familiar assumptions, familiar pathways, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the motorway. Being from Germany, using the motorway without tempo limit is a great experience. However, the motorway gets us there from the past to the present. The motorway created survival, created success. The motorway is not the enemy. The problem is believing it is the only path into your future. The maze field represents uncertainty, possibility, opportunity, future growth. When walking through the maze field for the first time, the first pathway is almost invisible. It feels uncomfortable, uncertain, unnatural. But every deliberate step and every repetition pushes the maze down slightly, and eventually a new neural pathway starts to emerge. As neuroscience often says, neurons that fire together wire together. Frankl wrote, between stimulus and response, there's a space where freedom lives, but also where there's choice, interpretation, agency, and conscious direction. We cannot always control our circumstances, but we can choose the meaning we attach to it. We can choose how we interpret them. And we can choose the action we take because of them. Meaning determines interpretation, interpretation determines action, and action determines future pathways. Use the subconscious past and the meaning attached to it as fuel for consciously building the future. One deliberate action at a time, repeated consistently, enough to create confidence, momentum, and eventually a new pathway. Because if we do not consciously create a new pathway through the maze field, the motorway of the past becomes the motorway of the future. And that brings us to the final part of this story. Action. Accelerate where action shapes opportunity. Most people wait for confidence before acting. I'm not ready. What if it doesn't work? What if I fail? What do others think? What do others say? Others often hide behind perfection, but perfection is often fear in a fancy dress. The truth is, confidence rarely comes first. Action comes first, then confidence, then momentum, then mastery. The first pathway through the maze field almost always feels uncomfortable. Sorry. The tens feels easier. The hundreds becomes the road. Eventually, it becomes the motorway into your future. In my doctoral research, I spent years studying why some leaders and organizations consistently discover opportunities where others don't see them. What I found was surprisingly consistent across industry, leaders, cultures, and markets. So obstacles is really the obstacle. More often than not, the obstacle is interpretation of the obstacle. They are often the leaders who create the future aren't always the ones with the most resources. They're often the ones that are most resourceful, who learn to reinterpret uncertainty faster than everyone else. Because once interpretation changes, possibility becomes visible. This is why some organizations discover new customers, new markets, new business models, new growth engines, while others continue repeating the past and only see obstacles. The future belongs to people, leaders, and organizations that reinterpret disruption faster than others. Whether it's boardroom or township, startups or multinationals, the principle remains the same. The past fuels identity. The present ignites interpretation, and the future accelerates through action. Fuel, ignite, accelerate. Meaning, interpretation, action. Past is fixed. The future does not yet exist. The only place we can act is the present. But we can choose the meaning we attach to the past. We can choose how we interpret the present. And we can choose the action that shape our future. Which perhaps leaves us with three questions. One, What meaning am I attaching to my past? Two, how I'm interpreting my present. And three, what action will I take to create the future I want and I deserve? Or put differently, how can I use my past as fuel to ignite my present in order to accelerate my future? Again, how can I use the past as fuel to ignite my present in order to accelerate my future? Because the greatest opportunities are often hidden inside obstacles that we have not yet learned how to interpret. And those who learn to interpret them first often create a future. And perhaps that is how obstacles become opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. That was incredibly thought-provoking. For me, I think one of the most powerful reminders from what you shared is that disruption itself is neither positive or negative. It is our response to it that determines the outcome. And you said it, that the real opportunity lies in seeing disruption differently, in seeing the change differently, in seeing risk differently. Now, whilst we wait for questions in the chat, ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to put your hand up, or you can just pop your question or comment in the chat. Let us engage a little bit. But Doc, while we wait for that, you spoke about why human beings are deeply uncomfortable with uncertainty. And you said that many people experience that physical sensation of possibility and interpret that as fear. And, we often speak about disruption as though it is a business issue, but ultimately people experience it emotionally.
Mm.
So, my question, in your experience, what is the biggest emotional barrier that prevents individuals from seeing opportunities in moments of uncertainty?
Yeah, that is a great it's a great question, and it has a lot to do with the willingness to leave certainty behind and allow for the possibility of not knowing the answers. Okay, because it's so much more comfortable to basically revert back to the tried and tested because it feels safe, it feels familiar. And people really struggle to distinguish between something being unfamiliar and something being unsafe. They think because it's unfamiliar, it's unsafe, but it's an inhibitor for growth, because growth is really happening outside your comfort zone. And once you make the switch to see unfamiliarity as a good thing, right? As a precursor for growth, I think there is a great opportunity for you to overcome this emotional barrier of not wanting, no, of not wanting to change. And so it is the power is really within everyone to make that switch and to have micro projects, so to speak, where you get out of your project, out of your comfort zone, and basically tell your brain, "Oh, listen, it didn't kill me. It's actually I learned, or I basically progressed." And then through repetition, you create these new neural pathways that allows you to go that new route. So it's really the willingness to basically outsmart your brain, so to speak, because your brain always defaults to the tried and tested, and you have to really outsmart your brain and say, "Listen, I hear you or I feel you, but let us go that road." So it's really your mind, it's really mind over matter, so to speak, and it's really in everyone's hands or body to do the step to overcome the brain's default function.
That's absolutely incredible. We learned so much from you, such valuable expertise. I have an anchor question, almost a follow-up question from one of our audience members, Millicent. Millicent is asking, in your opinion, Doc, what is the single most important mindset shift one should adapt to take meaningful action and shape the future we aspire to achieve?
Yeah. That is a, I think it's a loaded question. I'm certainly not an expert, but my opinion is that it really starts with the first step. So it is action over confidence. Okay, so that you simply take the first action and convince yourself it will be fine. It will not kill me. The saber-toothed tiger will not will not kill me. If I send out this business plan, or if I basically send out this post on LinkedIn, it will be not the end of my career. Okay, it will be fine. It will be fine. Just it's action and don't wait for confidence. Because if you wait for confidence, you will never take the first step. So that's why action, confidence, eventually you create competence, and then mastery, and this in return um, turns the needle really from where you are right now towards where you want to go. And it all starts, quite frankly, if I may add, to take a view of where you want to be. Okay? Instead of just scrolling notifications, these wasting your time with social media. I'm not saying social media is a waste, but a lot of time you basically waste time on social media because you are not prepared to face the uncomfortable question, to be still, right? To be still, to sit with yourself for 10 minutes and ask yourself questions. And that's actually the study I was referring to. You rather take electric shocks than to face yourself and ask questions. Where do you want to go? What's important to you? Where are you coming from? And these are the questions. What is the life that you want to create, and how do you want to create it? And I think this is really the crux, that you first get clear about where you want to go. Otherwise, you just drift. And by the way, it took me also more than 50 years to figure that out. It's not a problem not to know that. Okay. And I'm not pointing fingers onto anyone like you don't know what your life goal is or purpose is. But I would point fingers to people that say, listen, I don't care, and I don't want to find out. Okay. So you really have to find out where you want to go to. Otherwise you drift. And at the end of your life, you basically regret that you haven't lived the life that you're capable of, but you lived the life that others wanted you to or expected you to. And I think that is the number one regret of your life if you face that.
Thank you
Hope that
so
answered
much.
the question.
That was incredible. I think also we can think about progress over perfection, and like you said, taking that first step, that leap of faith. We don't need to be perfect to start. Millicent, thank you so much for that question. We have another question from Chris. Chris says, "Greetings, Doc. With so many AI tools available, are we making some people lazy in using their own analytical minds, whilst I appreciate the benefits of using these?"
Another very good question. So AI, first and foremost, is a tool, okay? And I think each and everyone has to decide whether you want to be managed by the tool or manage the tool, right? So that's a very important distinction. And I think if you have found the meaning in life, okay, like I have found now my meaning to close the gap between corporate top of pyramid and communities base of pyramid, then AI is a wonderful tool. Okay, but it cannot replace your individual lens and your beliefs and and the meaning that you attach to it. Okay, you can obviously externalize and outsource everything in life, even the meaning of your life to AI. But I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, because AI will never be able to understand the complexity of your trauma, of your upbringing, of your childhood influences, of the teacher that reprimanded you, of of your dad that smacked you when you were 4 years old. I hope no one has experienced that, but obviously that may have happened. And these are the things that you need to face between that you have to face yourself. Okay, so the number one relationship is the relationship with yourself. Okay, and there's no space for any technical technical tools. It's a matter of figuring that out, and then with AI, it's a wonderful tool to basically amplify your impact. That's how I prefer to see it.
Thank you so much, Doc. Love it. Absolutely love it. We have a question from Corrine. Love your comment that the past is a curated curriculum for the future. As leaders, what is one strategy we can use to access that curriculum more effectively for building our future?
It's once again a wonderful question. I really love the quality of the question because I really got to the heart of my research, and I've asked myself a very similar question. I have a retail background. I could never understand why a lot of retailers do not embrace the opportunities of the township economy, right? Because it's 40 million people, it's a $1 trillion economy, and that goes to that very same problem because you have to be prepared to invite an alternate view to your reality. Okay? If from an organization perspective, if the business model made you successful over 140 years and you are here, okay, it needs great leadership and organizational design to allow for the possibility of an alternate business model to define your future. Yet very many leaders, many leaders, they have they have been successful in this business model, and they're at the top of an organization, a CEO, a CFO, a CMO. And for them to say, listen, I'm prepared to um, allow a different view and to get myself from my elevated position as CEO to the same position as a cleaner, as a middle manager, and say, listen, we are exploring that together. That's the biggest challenge. You have knowledge in your organization, but how often does strategy live just with the top five or top 10 people of the organization? They have the right to develop the strategy. They have the view that they have all the knowledge. Yet, the view and the viewpoints and the contribution of the entire organization is almost wasted. How are the Japanese the leader in quality? Or how have they become leader in quality, in total quality management? The top executives abdicated their power to the frontline worker at the assembly line and said, I give you the power to stop the assembly line of my just-in-time delivery because you, in fact, have the insight to improve the process or to gain more efficient and to generate better quality. And that's exactly the same that we are seeing here. Are you, as a leadership, willing to question your reality? And are you allowing for a different business model or future as opposed to your past? Hope that answers this question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Doc. And it absolutely does. You gave us a lot to think about. And thank you for that, Doc. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for engaging in the chat. Doc, thank you so much for making us rethink disruption. There's so much self-mastery almost and
Yeah.
self-reflection we have done in our short time with you. So thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, with that said, let us all be reminded that growth is not found on the other side of disruption. Growth is often found within it. And perhaps the question is, am I spending more energy resisting change or learning from it? Once again, Doc, a sincere thank you for sharing your wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to each of you for investing your time and commitment to sparking, shifting, and succeeding. We will see you next week at the same time, same place with another world-class speaker, Tony Hunter. Until then, bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.